Yeah, so he kind of looked at, especially coming out of the Great Depression with the stock market crash, that there was some instability in the system caused by investment demand. And so that could end up having some negative effects on the economy. And so today we're going to continue on with part of what, oh shoot, actually I wanted to keep that down, didn't I? No, we'll just do it. It'll be better on the board. Let's think about doing. All right, so suppose we've got a multiplier. So basically animal spirits, let's try to use government policy to offset that. So in your notes from yesterday, did I give you a number? Did we start off with an example?
No, you ended by saying it's all yes.
Oh, that's right. Okay, but we did do this. That's the part I was wondering. I couldn't remember if we got there. Okay. So, so to kind of continue on yesterday, what was the size of that injection? $1,000?
$1,000.
All right. So from your example, let's just put continued. There's more to figure out there. I kind of gave you guys the motivation of it. So we had a change in government spending equal to $1,000. And the idea of the multiplier is that that money's going to get spent over and over in the economy. And so I kind of started that motivation with they go to Guns R Us goes to Walmart goes to Pizza Village, right? And so this money is getting spent. So one person's spending is another person's income up to the marginal propensity to consume. All right, and so from yesterday, 1,000, let's see, so we had the change in Y on your number. So note, I'll just claim it as a note here. The final change in income, which is our triangle Y, is the addition of all the change in Y numbers. And so from your numbers, Guns R Us had 1,000, so the change in income, Guns R Us had 1,000 plus $900 was Walmart, plus $810 was Pizza Village, plus ... And we just add up all of the new money that was created. Okay, so we have a shortcut formula to figure out what this is. This is a lot of numbers. So let's do a shortcut. Shortcut formula. And the shortcut is the final change in income will be equal to 1 over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume times the change in spending. So this little chunk here is the multiplier. So this is the expenditure multiplier. And so for this problem, what was our marginal propensity to consume that I gave you yesterday? 0.9. So with our 0.9 here, using the formula, this would be 1 over 1 minus 0.9 times the $1,000. And does anybody see what that is? If you got a regular old calculator, not your phone, you can do it. Justin's got the old-fashioned calculator. It's good to have a calculator. I used to bring a calculator to English exams, so I suggest you buy a basic calculator. So Justin, what I want to do first is what this number is. Don't do the whole thing, but 1 over 1 minus 0.9, everybody can help me with that one. What does that equal? 0.1, which is 1/10. And if we got a fraction in the denominator, flip it over, multiply it times the numerator, what's the multiplier? Oh, sorry, I got holding my water. 5 plus 5, I was trying to do this. 10, good, very good. So 1 over 0.1, which is 1/10. 1/10, flip it over, multiply times the numerator. Anyway, do it with your calculator, do it however you want. It's 10. So the multiplier is 10. 10 times 1,000 equals? 10 times 1,000 equals? 10,000. So the point here is that assuming this structure, we have the potential for the multiplier to kick in and get to 10,000. All right, so the problem is, and I mentioned, as Jesse pointed out, that this is going to turn out to be BS, is that this holds prices constant. So the only way you get that, so there's a couple problems with the multiplier. So let's put problems with the multiplier effect. Number one, and I think probably the most important one, is that it assumes prices stay fixed. Assumes prices, the price level stays fixed, meaning no inflation, right? No inflation. Now this was part of Keynes' theory. He said sticky wages. Now sticky wages isn't even quite enough to get us where we want to be. And so the problem with the theory, with the multiplier effect, is that as prices go up, people don't buy as much as what's stated here. So as soon as the price level stays fixed, the multiplier is much lower when prices rise, when the price level rises. So we're not getting as big of a bang. We're not going to get a 10. We're going to get something less if prices are taken into account. And in fact, the price level itself will eventually correct itself in the long run back to where our full employment level was. And so the long run multiplier, and this is kind of the key point, the long run multiplier is 0. The long run multiplier is 0. Economy goes back to full employment in the long run. Now, Keynes had a rebuttal to that again isn't the best, but it's a catchy phrase. And he said, in the long run, we're all dead. He didn't want to wait for the invisible hand of the market to correct things in the long run. He thought the long run was a decent period of time. He was exaggerating. He was kind of a flamboyant character. And he said, in the long run, we're all dead. So Keynes said, in the long run, we are all dead. And what he meant by that is, let's not wait that long. Let's use government policy to try to correct things and steer the economy. So the meaning where he was coming from let's use government policy which would include a change in government spending, a change in taxes, a change in money supply, which we're going to spend a whole chapter on, but I want to include that in here. But let's kind of be active with the government. Let's use government policy to steer the economy. And smooth out the cycles. All right, so one of the things Keynes really didn't take into account very well is the timing problem. So this is what he was meaning by in the long run we're all dead. But, let's put a big but here, but there is a timing problem. Keynes did not factor in well. So this is kind of the timing problem. We've talked about this a little bit already. When will we learn whether we're in a recession right now, today? Today is April 4th, 2024. When are we going to learn whether the U.S. economy is in recession?
6 months.
Yeah, 6 months at a minimum. We might get our first indication, but really a year. So somewhere between 6 months and a year, what'll happen is they'll come out with some early estimates 6 months from now, and then we'll have some more information that'll kind of tighten up those numbers at the 9-month and 12-month mark. But after 12 months, we'll have a pretty good idea where we're at. Well, that's a pretty big timing problem, right? So let's say we're in recession right now, but we don't know it. Well, what's the appropriate policy? Should we expand government spending, or should we contract? Should we lower taxes? Should we increase the money supply? We don't have great information. So then what do? We go 6 months into the future, and then we're like, oh, looks, we're in recession. So let's increase government spending. But do we actually know now, September of 24, whether we're still in recession? No. We might have recovered already, right? And so now we're potentially doing a policy that's not correcting the problem, it might even be adding to the problem. So that's one of the big things that is difficult with this Keynes prescription here. So, timing problem. So, key point. We don't know whether we are in recession until 6 to 12 months in the future. And this means it is likely that the appropriate policy will not be done at the right time. And furthermore, people against Keynes theory, like me, would say, just to reveal my cards a little bit, would say that the government policy might be adding more to the problem rather than the solution. So it's possible the policy will create more problems than the intended help.
When you say the policy won't be done in time, do you mean it just won't roll out fast enough? I don't even think you could get a policy through fast enough to help.
That's right, and actually in future chapters, I didn't want to put too much on here, but whether the time it takes a policy to actually go into effect, there's a process that you got to go through Congress and get it passed and blah, blah, blah. So there's also additional lags that we'll discuss in a future chapter too. So yes, that's the big timing problem. I think this COVID, I mean, I'm sure you guys weren't following what the Federal Reserve was doing, which we will talk about when we get to the next chapter. But when the government funded the COVID checks, I like to call it the COVID spending, where we all got $1,500 and just kind of dished it out. The inflation from that change in the money supply and that change in government spending, they kind of went hand in hand with that particular one. That inflation didn't take effect for a year, right? And so the policy was enacted to try to help the COVID problem, but then the more issues were created a year when we started experiencing inflation like we haven't seen for a long time. Okay, so any other questions or comments there? All right, let me get a couple more definitions, and then we'll go back to seeing what this looks like with the graph with countercyclical policy. All right, so a couple terms here. So, what is a balanced budget? A balanced budget, BB. What does it mean for you can think at a personal level. If you have a balanced budget for this year, what have you done at your personal level? If you have a balanced budget, or it could even be a balanced budget for this week. You just got paid, you get paid every 2 weeks. What does a balanced budget mean? Yeah, Seth?
When you judge your money on like line if you haven't gone over anything.
Okay, so for you personally, it would be something like your income, right? You haven't spent more than your income. So yeah, you're on the line, right? If you got paid an $1,100 paycheck, you didn't spend more money than $1,100. You were equaled out, right? Stayed on the line, as Seth said. So if you have an $1,100 paycheck, but you spent $1,300, what did you do? You're in debt. You borrowed, right? So borrowing now can be kind of our mechanism to look at. So in terms of the government here, the money coming in is tax receipts. And so a balanced budget is a situation where tax revenue, which I'm going to use big T, tax revenue collected by the government equals government spending, which is our G from our cigarettes. So kind of a short and sweet way to put it is big T equals G. The government collected taxes that were sufficient to pay for its spending. Unfortunately, the US government basically hasn't done that for about 50 years. They're not very good at doing that.
When did we stop, like, not being in debt, I guess?
We had a little bit better handle on it really after World War II. So there was a huge deficit in World War II. We got to go fight Nazi Germany and all that. And so we spent a bunch of money that we didn't have there. And so, but then that deficit went down and then kind of went up and down for a while. And then really in the 1970s and 80s, we started kind of running regular deficits that piled on the debt. So we'll talk about the whole debt and deficit stuff coming up. All right, so T equals G. Another way to look at this that we do is to say, well, what is government savings, which is almost a joke. But how much is government savings? So a formula for government savings would be T minus G. So if the government collected more taxes than what they spent, they'd have some leftover, which we can kind of call savings, or we also call it a government surplus. So the government saving or surplus funds, taxes that are greater than government spending. But if the amount of taxes collected, T, is less than G, which is the usual case, then savings, government savings, is negative. And what do we call it then? A government, if we have negative savings, if T is greater than, if T is less than G, a deficit. Good, so that is the deficit. So government savings is negative, and it is called a government budget deficit. So, any questions on that? All right, so the type of spending that, let's say, gets us in the most trouble is discretionary fiscal spending. So, discretionary fiscal spending. And actually, scratch that. I meant to put policy rather than spending. Because this applies to taxes and it applies to money, not just spending. All right, so discretionary fiscal spending. What does it mean to have something at your discretion? Use your discretion, son, I trust you. Maybe your dad said to you at some point. What does it mean to have something at your discretion? Judgment, your choice, right? So yes, you have kind of the power to change. And so that's what we mean by discretionary fiscal policy, is specifically looking at the powers of the fiscal side of the house, Congress and President, on changes in spending and changes in taxes as opposed to monetary policy. And so this is discretionary policy are changes in law and other policies related to changes in government spending and changes in taxes. So for the United States, this is Congress and President Joe Biden currently. The power of the budget, the power of the purse, I think is, you'll hear it called, lies with the Congress and President for fiscal policy changes. All right, now to get this back to Keynes's idea, I've got a couple more definitions to lay on you here. I'm just going to put it over here so we can use if you want to increase real GDP, so expand the economy, you want to use expansionary fiscal policy. So if you're trying to increase income for the country, you're going to use expansionary fiscal policy. And so what would you be doing with government spending? Spending more or spending less? If you're trying to expand the income of the nation, expand the economy, expand real GDP, more or less? More, right? So expansionary fiscal policy would be an increase in G, but we haven't talked much about T over here. If you're trying to expand the money, would you decrease taxes or increase taxes? If you're trying to expand the economy, we would decrease it, right? So I saw a couple people putting down. So if we put more money into people's pockets, and now we're going to have a different type of spending effect, right? So we have a tax decrease of some sort. You've got more money to spend. You run to Walmart, and Walmart people get paid. The Walmart people run to Pizza Village, And we're back into that chain of spending again. So expansionary fiscal policy would be expanding government spending or decreasing taxes. Let me throw in a little note here. So we have our money left over after taxes. So we call it our disposable income because we all know that you guys get paid a $1,100 paycheck because you put in 11 hours at $10 an hour, but that's not how much you get in your hand, right? So what you get in your hand is disposable income, money that you have your discretion to go in and buy stuff with. So our disposable income is equal to income minus taxes. So this is disposable income. This is our, if you want to think of it as gross income, which is also our real GDP number for the nation. And then this is our taxes. Taxes paid. Taxes paid by you is what the government collected in taxes. Huh? So that is our money to be able to spend. So think about disposable income. This is like, spendable income by you. All right, any questions on that? Okay. So, restrictive. How did the book? I usually do. Yeah, restrictive. Restrictive fiscal policy. So now, as far as Keynes' idea of steering the economy, the economy looks like it's running a little hot. It's running a little hot, so let's tamp it down, right? So we're on one of our upswings, so we're going to use restrictive policy. And so restrictive policy would be to decrease government spending or increase taxes. So these are the tools that are in the government's hands, government being Congress and President. We're going to set aside the money supply for later, monetary policy, to try to steer the economy. All right. Questions or comments? Let's do a graph. So let's start off the economy here. And let's, what do I want to do? I don't want to get too crazy for starters. So let's just do a long run equilibrium, your home base. I was going to throw you right into the COVID example, but let's take a few baby steps here first. All right, so we'll tell the kind of the traditional Keynes story here. So investments are down, right? Stock market crash or something, investments down, so investment demand falls and the aggregate demand curve falls to AD2. So let me write this as an example. Suppose the stock market crashes and there is a sharp decrease in aggregate demand. All right, so now I'm going to give you two things. We're going to review what we did last chapter, which was just 2 days ago, with the invisible hand stuff. So let's take case 1. Invisible hand. And the invisible hand I'm going to start to put on, and we'll talk a little bit more about an economist named Hayek. So Hayek was one of Keynes' critics. And he was more of an invisible hand guy. Leave the market alone. We'll get better solutions with the invisible hand. All right, so with the invisible hand, first of all, we have the price level. Sorry, I didn't put my price level up here. So price level 1, price level 2. We can say 100 just for starters like we've been doing. Price level's down and GDP is down. So the actual level of real GDP is less than full employment. So step 1, the decrease in aggregate demand leads to lower prices and lower real GDP. That's moving from A to B, which is just kind of a review of what we did last week, the short run effect. In the long run, resource prices would adjust and we'd head towards point C. So step 2, in the long run, there'll be an increase in short run aggregate supply and long run equilibrium restored at point C. So you guys we did a little more detail last week, so this is just, or not last week, 2 days ago when we did this invisible hand part. But the path of the economy with the invisible hand is pretty much A to B to C. We need to get back to the full employment level. Aggregate demand, the new aggregate demand curve shows the intersection of the two, and away we go. All right, so case number 2 then is Keynes is going to say, let's not wait for the long run to correct itself. In the long run, we're all dead. And so let's do what to the economy to do something about this bad situation? What would Keynes prescribe here? Instead of just leaving things alone, what sort of fiscal policy could be used to get us back to full employment?
That would increase.
Yeah, we want something that would increase demand, and so what would increase demand? What kind of policy? It's up on the board, look a little to the left. Right? Expansionary fiscal policy, which would mean increasing what? Government spending or decreasing taxes, or by the way, a combination of the both, right? I mean, you can do a little bit of A and a little bit of B. So the idea with Keynes here is that let's not wait for the economy to get back to here, let's just kind of get us back up to A real quick, right? So let's get us back up to A. And so the idea with Keynes is to use that policy to now get us back up here. So to kind of track things out here, let's go I1, G1, aggregate demand 2 has the new investment demand I2, but the old level of spending, G1. And so Keynes' prescription was, now let's bounce back to the old level, but AD2 is going to be at the new level of investment and a new level of government spending, G2. I hope I'm not getting too much down there, but I've found over the years that it's better to kind of go through that process rather than just saying, oh, we go back to where we started. Well, why did we go back to where we started? It's because of what happened. I'm going to write that stuff out as well. But that economy goes down, we push it back up, right? Use counter-cyclical policy. All right, so case number 2 is the Keynesian prescription. Number 1 is going to start off the same way. There's a decrease in aggregate demand that causes a decrease in the price level and a recession of some sort. All right, so that gets us from point A to B. Point A to B. Same as before. But now number 2 is we're going to use counter-cyclical policy. Counter-cyclical policy. I didn't use that word before, but that's what we were doing. Income's down, so let's use expansionary policy to counter it, right? It's a counter move. So counter-cyclical policy to offset the decrease in investment. And so that moves us from point B back to A, rather than waiting to go down to C.
Wouldn't it be better to go to C though, or try to push it to C because it's in theory a lower price? No, it's a lower price.
Yeah, I mean, kind of one way to think about it is that at the end of the day, prices don't matter, that as long as they're in balance. So this is where we talked about if the prices of everything at Walmart doubled in price, you would care, but you wouldn't care if your income also doubled. Then you could buy the same amount of stuff. Same thing with, now the price reduction is kind of harder. It's like, oh, if all the prices at Walmart were cut in half, that sounds great for me, right? Everything's half as cheap. But if my income goes down by half, I'm in the same position. So in the long run, prices are going to fluctuate to bring us back to the real economy, which is at full employment. So either way, it doesn't really matter in that sense. It'll matter in some other reasons here as we build the case. So, okay, any other questions? All right, so what about if we have an increase in investment demand? So example number 2. Suppose the stock market is booming. With speculation. been on a real bull market, right? Major bull market. So in stock market language, a bull market is a rising market. Stock prices are going up. So it might be a sign that the economy's overheating. And again, starting from a long-run equilibrium, hopefully you guys are getting fast at drawing that. There's our home base. The bull market has aggregate demand heating up. And so the economy goes through an expansion from point A to point B. In the long run, this was kind of the Nadia effect, if you look back in your notes, where we had some sort of expansion in aggregate demand. In the long run, this would end up being inflationary. We'd go to C. So with our invisible hand case, we go from point A to B to C. I'm going to start using maybe shorter and shorter notation just so you guys have the idea. But Keynes' prescription, the Keynesian case, is to go from A to B back to A. A to B back to A. And so we're going to use restrictive policy, cut government spending to bring us back to an aggregate demand curve AD3. Use restrictive policy to counter the booming investment. Okay, kind of got the feel of what's going on then with using government spending with our model and different impacts of it. Okay, so let's do one last example, and then I got a short little video of one of our boring economics conferences with Keynes and Hayek actually at the podium explaining their cases. So, but you'll get some more extra credit than what you already got today. So COVID. So with COVID, our long-run equilibrium again. Start off here. The economy was doing pretty well, by the way. I think we were operating probably pretty close to equilibrium before COVID hit. So, COVID hits March 2020. What does happen to the economy? What does the government do? The economy goes down, we all know that. What would you say it did from our graph here? So, what were some of the COVID policies? So step one, March 2020. What happened? What did you guys learn March 15th or March 28th? What could you do? What couldn't you do?
Can't go outside.
Can't go outside, right? Okay, what about businesses? They closed them, right? By government force. So we have a special case that we'll do that, that we didn't necessarily have to take that measure, but that's what was chosen to do. So we shut down. So we have kind of a forced shutdown of private businesses by the government, and shelter in place, which depending on what state you lived in was heavier than others. So not only was businesses shut down, or many businesses, but in some places you couldn't even leave your house except for on certain times of day or something, right? Like if you're in New York City, I think they had some pretty big restrictions. Here in Kansas, I went fishing. I mean, it was great, actually. It was one of the best fishing years I've ever had. It was fun. I mean, I didn't have to teach you guys. I'd do a little Zoom thing, and then I'd go hit the lake. And the fishing was great that year. It was awesome. So, and I was following CDC guidelines. What did they say? Go out in fresh air as long as you're at least 6 feet from people. I'm like, fine, yeah, I'll go fishing. I'm right on the middle of the lake. Nobody's around. So it was awesome. So I actually have kind of fond memories of the COVID crisis in relationship to fishing. I didn't like that I couldn't go shopping where I wanted to do, but did we still have Amazon?
Yep.
Yeah. So did that government policy favor big business or small businesses? Big businesses. So Walmart, sales through the roof, Amazon sales through the roof, all that stuff. So, all right. Back to this now. So with this step one, what do you think is the main driver here? Is it long run aggregate supply, short run aggregate supply, or aggregate demand with shutting down businesses and not allowing people to go shopping, essentially? Aggregate demand? Aggregate supply?
We had a bunch of shortages for items.
Okay. So we had the supply was down. Would that be long run or short run? Short run. But what about demand? So remember, we can kind of think about demand as not just being little consumers, but it's C plus I plus G plus X. And so was there a lot of consumption going on, or was there less consumption than usual?
Is the answer that both went down?
It could be both, yeah. So, but definitely less consumption, and then investment. Were businesses expanding their businesses and stuff? No. So it's mostly a demand effect, but there'd certainly be some supply of resources and other things. So it could be a combined effect, but we can capture a lot of it with the demand. And there wasn't, at that time, upward pressure on prices. So we probably have most of the effect being a large aggregate demand effect.
Short run aggregate supply also counts as wages, and people lost their jobs during this time.
Right. Yep, so wages, and that's their income though, and so they didn't have their income to buy things, right? So this is where macro gets a little bit weird because you're kind of riding both sides of the fence in a sense, right? So mostly, yes, we could, I just don't even want to kind of mucky up. We could put like a little shift of aggregate supply because there was probably some supply effects as well from our aggregate supply perspective. But mostly it's captured through this dramatic decrease in demand. So notice even if I golf club this thing up a little bit, we're still going to be in this quadrant, right? If I kind of put a little bit of a shift here, we might be somewhere over here. So for all intents and purposes, it's okay to just kind of keep it with the demand effect. All right, so let's just put major decrease in aggregate demand. Causes us to be in this lower prices and lower output. Economy in recession. Unemployment at all-time highs except for the Great Depression. We didn't get up to that level, but we were at 10%, 13%. Remember, there's a couple different ways to measure unemployment, but we kind of instantly created unemployment. All right, and then what did we do with the response to correct it? Did we leave the economy correct itself to come back, or did we do something about it? We being the government. Did the government do something about it?
It gave people money.
Yeah, so this is the COVID spending is going to give people some money to try to get that up. And so now we start to see the inflationary effects of doing that. And so with COVID, we had the COVID check. So number 2, this wasn't until about, I don't even remember honestly, but let's just say, March 2021, it was roughly a year later, I'll just put approximately, government increases G with COVID checks to people and businesses. Ottawa University, I think, got about $5 million from COVID, just to give you a little taste. $5 million. All right, and some of that spending was restricted or whatever, but that was definitely a Keynesian response to try to get us back to where we were. All right, so I'm gonna get this video going. And I need you guys to pull out a piece of paper to take some notes down that you'll get some extra credit points for. Hold on, it'll still be there. I get this thing started. Okay, so on your papers, I want you to write boom and bust cycle. Boom and bust cycle. And then put on Keynes as another kind of down your paper, write Keynes notes and Hayek notes. Okay, so here we are at the Marriott. I guess it's the Hyatt. So this is the way I'm going to a conference this Sunday. So this is kind of typical. You got your thing, come to the front desk, and then Hayek and Keynes are checking in, getting ready for their presentations. So here we go.
Lord Keynes, welcome, sir. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine.
Your agenda.
That won't be necessary. I am the agenda. Tell them I've arrived.
And then tell them I've arrived.
And your name is?
Hayek. F.A. Hayek. Me. Freddie.
Yep. Hey.
Hey, listen, party at the Fed.
Already? 20 minutes.
Lonnie. John Maynard Keynes.
F.A. Hayek.
Yeah, we're opposed.
We oppose each other philosophically.
In the same studio.
We've been going back and forth for a century.
I want to steer markets.
I want them set free.
There's a boom and bust cycle and good reason to fear it.
Claim no interest rates.
It's the animal spirit. John Maynard Keynes wrote the book on modern macro. The man you need when the economy's off track. Depression, recession, now your question's in session. Have a seat and I'll school you with one simple lesson. Boom, 1929, the big crash. We didn't bounce back, economy's in the trash. Persistent unemployment, the result of sticky wages. Waiting for recovery, that's outrageous. I had a real plan, any fool can understand. The advice real simple, who's aggregate demand? C-I-G, all together gets to Y. Keep that total low and watch the economy fly.
We've been going back and forth for a century.
I want to steer markets.
I want them set free.
There's a boom and bust cycle and good reason to fear it.
Claim no interest rates.
It's the animal spirit. You see, it's all about spending. Hear the register cha-ching. Circular flow, the dome is everything. So if that flow is getting low, doesn't matter the reason. We need more government spending. Now it's stimulus season, so forget about saving. Get it straight out of your head. Like I said, in the long run, we're all dead. Savings is destruction, that's the paradox of thrift. Don't keep money in your pocket or that growth will never live. Because business is driven by the animal spirits, the bull and the bear. And there's reasons to fear its effects on capital investment, income, and growth. That's why the state should fill the gap with stimulus, both the monetary and the fiscal. They're equally correct. Public works, giving teachers war has the same effect. Even a broken window hits the glass man. Has to call the multiplier, driving higher the economy's health. And if the central bank's interest rate policy tanks, a liquidity trap, that new money stuck in the banks. Deficits could be the cure you've been looking for. Let the spending soar now that you know the score. My general theories made quite an impression. Revolution. I transformed the econ profession. You know me, modesty, still I'm taking the bow. So say it loud and say it proud. We're all Keynesians now.
We've been going back and forth for a century.
I want to steer markets.
I want them set free.
There's a boom and bust cycle and good reason to fear it. I made my case straight, bitch. Listen up, can you hear it?
I'll begin in broad strokes, just like my friend Keynes. His theory conceals the mechanics of change. A simple equation, too much aggregation ignores human action and motivation. Channing continues as a justification for bailouts, payoffs, by pulls with machinations. Provide them with cover to sell us a free lunch. Then all that we're left with is debt and a bunch. If you're living high on that cheap credit hog, don't look for a cure from the hair of the dog. Real savings come first if you want to invest. The market coordinates time with interest. Your focus on spending is pushing on Fred. In the long run, my friend, it's your theory that's there. So sorry there, buddy, if that sounds like invective. Prepare to get schooled in my Austrian perspective. We've been going back and forth for a century.
I want to steer markets.
I want them set free.
There's a boom and bust cycle and good reason to fear it.
Claim no interest rates.
It's the animal spirit.
The place you should study isn't the bust, it's the boom that should make you feel leery. That's the thrust of my theory. The capital structure is key. Malinvestments wreck the economy. The boom gets started with an expansion of credit. The Fed sets rates low. Are you starting to get it? That new money is confused for real loanable things. But it's just inflation that's driving the ones who invest in new projects like housing construction. The boom plants the seeds for its future destruction. The savings aren't real, consumption's up too. And the grasping for resources reveals there's too few. So the boom turns to bust as the interest rates rise. But the cost of production, price signals relies. The boom was a binge, that's a matter of fact. Now it's devaluing capital that makes up the slack. But the rest of the late 20s or 2005, booming bad investment seems like they'd thrive. You must save to invest, don't use the printing press, or a bust will surely follow, an economy depressed. Your so-called stimulus will make things worse. Just more of the same, more incentives perverse. And a credit crunch ain't a liquidity trap. Just
right, so what did you guys have down? So let's see, Jesse, give me a number between 3 and 11.
7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Justin, what did you put for anything on your paper? Just some, tell us whether it was Keynes or Hayek. What stuck out to you?
For Keynes that he wrote, like what modern macro is, sort of book about it, and that's what this is like a big.
Yeah, so that was his theory was kind of the one that came out of the Great Depression, right? And so we really didn't have a distinction in economics between micro and macro. Everything was just economics in a sense. So yeah, he was definitely influential. So what else did you have? What does he base? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just give me something from Hayek's side. What was some of his? Okay, so yeah, stimulus making something worse. So the fatal conceit part at the end here is kind of at the heart of the issue that the economy is actually too complex to be engineered, right? And so people in government and economists for that matter that have contributed along the way that are kind of on the Keynesian thinking, we can do this and this will make things better and we'll do this and make things better, but that stimulus might end up causing more harm than good when it's not timed properly like we did in class. So Hayek talked about malinvestment. That's kind of a weird word. Did anybody pick up what he meant by malinvestment?
Bad. Mal means bad.
Mal means bad, yes. So kind of bad investment, good. What was the bad part that was going on in his opinion? When the government kept interest rates low, which is a stimulus thing. So stimulus of low interest rates, government policy keeping interest rates low. What did that do? What did people start? They showed it in the video. It was something that happened leading up to 2008. What do people buy when interest rates are low? Like your moms and dads and other people. Houses. And so the malinvestment part is kind of interesting in that we have because interest rates were artificially low trying to stimulate the economy, we had more houses being built. Now that might seem innocent enough that, oh, what's wrong with more houses being built? Well, the mal part of the investment is that it artificially boomed the housing market. And so the prices were out of whack because of the stimulus. And so we have, from the United States perspective, if we kind of look in the aggregate, the macro perspective, we have too many houses and not enough factories. Maybe a little bit of pollution. And so money is being channeled into one area, not the other. So housing prices boom. And then what happens to housing prices when they're artificially high? Pop. Now here's the bad part that isn't so simple for the average Joe to pick up, even me when I first got exposed to this into the theory more. Can we correct the problem very easily? We just spent billions and billions of dollars on building houses, and now we learn, whoops, I guess houses was kind of the wrong choice. They're not really worth this much. Can we now just change houses into factories? No. So that is the one problem with that, is that if we make some bad choices because of the stimulus, then the consequences of that can be pretty dire, and it's going to take maybe 3 years or 4 years or more to kind of reallocate things back in order, right, after it was distorted with the stimulus. All right, good enough. Let's call it there. We'll see you tomorrow.